Remember that before you became a mother, before you became somebody's wife, before you became an employee, employer, before you served at your church, God created Rika. He just created Rika. He just created Mia. He didn't create Mia the mom, Mia the leader. He created Mia. And if God found me worthy enough of just being me, then I need to stand in that value, in that identity, and really spend my time with God and asking God, God, show me who I am in your eyes. Let me see myself through your eyes, God, because once you see yourself the way God sees you, oh, let me tell you, it's a whole different. It's like game over. It's different. Why? Because you feel it. You stand taller, your shoulders, roll back, your head is lifted higher. Why? Because God says he will lift your head higher, right? When we're not feeling worthy, what happens? Our head is hanging low.
Today, I'm excited to talk to Mia Perez, who is a transformational speaker and resilience consultant who captivates audiences with her powerful storytelling, heart centered approach, and deep insights into overcoming life's toughest challenges. As an author and master storyteller, she's become a sought after speaker for events and podcasts, sharing a journey of healing, empowerment, and feminine embodiment. Mia's transformative approach has helped countless women experience breakthrough in emotional resilience, mindset shifts, and self love. Her ability to help women move past limiting beliefs, reclaim their royal identity, and embrace a life of elegance and abundance has been life changing for many. This was a really insightful and lovely conversation with Mia, another woman of faith, and it's so amazing for me that I get to connect with all of these amazing women from across the world and just talk about God. I love the fact that we can just openly talk about God, talk about Jesus, and talk about transformation because of Jesus. So I look forward to you listening to this episode this conversation that I had with Mia, and I know that you're going to enjoy it. Please find all of Mia's information in the show notes as well.
Do you wish that you could lead your team in a way that honors and glorifies God? Are you struggling to overcome self-doubt as a leader and have a desire to be more confident in your role? Welcome to the Woman of Faith in Leadership podcast. I'm Rika, and for the last decade, I've experienced my fair share of managing challenging employees and teams in middle management leadership roles. I committed my leadership journey to God, and it changed everything. And I'm ready to share everything I've learned with you. Now, if you're ready to lead your team in a way that honors God, grab that notebook and pen, and don't forget your chai latte, and let's dive in.
If you've been feeling stuck in self-doubt or wondering if you're truly leading the way God intended, I've got something that'll help. The Confidence Kickstart Challenge. This isn't just another leadership workshop. It's a faith-filled, practical, and power-packed hour designed to help you break through the fear and finally lead like Jesus, with courage and clarity. We'll discuss what's really holding you back from bold, spirit-led leadership, how Jesus navigated leadership with authority and grace, and the first steps that you can take to start leading confidently. It's happening live on June the 25th for our US participants and June the 26th for the Australian participants. And yes, there are amazing door prizes for those who participate. Head to events.womenoffaithinleadership.com to register. It's free, and I can't wait for you to walk this journey with me. Let's kickstart your confidence together.
Hi everyone, I'm so excited to be here with you for another episode of Women of Faith in Leadership. And today I have with me a very special guest, Mia Perez. And Mia, welcome to the show.
Hi, Rika. I'm so thrilled to be here with you today. Thank you so much for the invitation.
It is my biggest pleasure, and we're talking about a very, very important topic. Why don't you introduce yourself to the listeners, tell them what you are most passionate about, and what are we going to be talking about today?
Yes, absolutely. So yes, my name is Mia Perez, known as the Soft Power Queen. And there's a story that I'll share about that journey, how that came about. I am a transformational speaker, best-selling author, consultant for women, and my brand is Queen Within. I have an academy for women that goes from healing journey to ascension. We work on mindset and all those things that help you elevate to become the queen that you were created to be. And I have a journal as well. I just started my podcast, and my passion is helping women. And it's always been in the women's empowerment space. But as of the past few years, the Lord really defined where He wanted me to be in the space of how to help women and how to serve. And it's really in this space of reconnecting us to to the essence of who He created us to be. And one of those things is to our femininity. That is why I call myself now the soft power queen. My background came from an abusive background, and I went through a divorce. I went through a terrible time after my divorce, which had me battle mental health, because as if it wasn't enough to leave my abuser, I then was punished by my abuser through 5 years in court, nonstop. And I'm here in the United States, it's even unheard of, but for 5 years, every single week I was in court. So I was clinically and simultaneously diagnosed with complex PTSD, severe depression, anxiety, absolutely burnt out by court, by trying to just survive. And after, through God's mercy, that I was able to get through all of that in 2019, the judge was finally removed from family court because of an undercover investigation. And from then, I thought, yes, I'm free now. I can go and do what I'm called to do. Because during that 5-year period, I was also told that I could not speak as a survivor or I would go to jail. So many things happened during that time and really built my faith, but allowed me to find my purpose in all of this. And through that surviving, I was calling myself the bounce back queen, because I was so proud about bouncing back, right? But in that bouncing back, I was so about proving myself to everybody, to my abuser, to the people that didn't believe in me, to the people that believed my abuser, that I wanted to now prove to the world that I was worthy. And I call myself the bounce back queen. And I've been working on so many things. And then the Lord just kind of nudged me after a while and said, I don't need you to prove yourself to people. I see you. And that's when I found myself being so burnt out as a leader, as a creative, as a mother, as everything. And it was in that journey, God so beautifully brought everything back around. And He said, you're changing your name, because behold, I'm doing a new thing. And I was like, what am I supposed to call myself now? I've always said the bounce back queen. And He just gave me the soft power queen, because there's so much beauty and power and learning how to be soft as well. It's not about being weak, it's about being soft. So that's where everything ties in now to how I work with women in the different spaces of empowering them and reconnecting them to womanhood and femininity, God's way.
Wow, that is an amazing story. It never ceases to amaze me how amazing God is, and that He knows each and every one of us. And there are billions of people on this earth, and He knows every single one of us, and He cares for every single one of us. And so when you were telling your story, I was making some notes, because the immediate thing when you were mentioning about, speaking up, what came to mind was the fact that sometimes as women, we feel that in the workplace we can't speak up because we're a woman and because we don't have a say. And again, like we talked a little bit before we started recording, we talked a little bit about the listeners and what they, the things that they've been saying. And so one thing that for the listeners of this show that is very prevalent, nearly every single one who comes into the Facebook community or people who I speak to on DMs, they say to me that as a woman, they don't feel empowered at work to speak up. So let's start there, because I've made a couple of notes there. But for somebody who is, or for the women who are listening who are scared to speak up, what advice would you give to them?
That's such a great question, because I would ask them, first of all, what is the root issue? Because there's a reason why. It's not the people at work all the time. So if you really think about it, if you were probably at another job, there was another time during that period you worked there that you also didn't feel like you could speak up. Because you can take a person that is in different environments, and if there's someone that knows their identity and is strong in their voice, then they have no problem expressing it. You can put that person working at McDonald's, and you could put them and working at a bank. You can have them owning their own business. If they know who they are and they own their voice in their identity, right? It's like everything has to come together, but it's going to be rooted in your identity. Like, who are you? Because if you know who you are, and if you know that God created you for a reason, for a purpose, then you will find the power to speak up. And then, of course, you want to make sure that you are always in relationship, right, with your Heavenly Father, speaking your heart to Him, telling Him how you feel, asking the Holy Spirit. So it comes to, there's a lot of pieces that we can, plug in. But at the end of the day, I would ask, why don't you feel like speaking up? Because it's not your work environment. It's you. And when I encounter women, the women that I usually mentor in some way, I don't know if you face this, Rika, but a lot of the times we can trace back to their childhood, right? And I know I battled that many, many years. I had to deal with my childhood issues of not being heard or being dismissed, right? It's like you can express your feelings, but if they just don't take you serious, or maybe you were one in 5 children where, I mean, your parents are tending to so many kids, you can feel lost in that. So I would ask, why not? And when did it begin? Because it didn't start just this year or at this job. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And that is an amazing reflection. Love it. I love reflection. I think self-reflection is one of the most crucial things that you can do for yourself in your whole life, is to go back and reflect on, why did something just happen? Why did that thing just come out of your mouth that you just said that you didn't mean? Why did you just do that action, or, whatever that might be? So I really, really liked that question that you just asked to the listeners. I'm going to definitely put it in the show notes and invite the listeners to go and ask that question to yourself. Why do you feel like you can't speak up? It's not about the men. It's not about the fact that you don't feel like you have a voice at work. Where did it start for you? Amazing. Well done. That was awesome. I really like that. And then the other thing you mentioned that was so powerful in your introduction was the fact that you said you felt like you needed to prove yourself to people. And quite often, well, actually, yes, let me use the word quite often. We feel like we're not here we become people pleasers. As women, we are people pleasers. Why? Because we've got families, we've got children, we've got people that need things from us as the mum or the caregiver. And so in a sense, we become people pleasers because we want to keep people happy. And so something that was so powerful in what you had said is that God said that you do not need to prove yourself to people, because I already approve of you. You are worthy. So for the listeners of the show who's in that dark place at the moment, where they really feel like, I've got to work extremely hard to prove myself, because again, as a female, as a woman in leadership, you have to prove that you're worthy to be there, because it's been such a male dominated leadership industry for all these years, and there's a lot of research to prove that. We all know that. So what would you say to those women that are really in that deep, dark pit of they need to prove themselves to the men or to other people, and how can they get out of that? Well, I know that, you can't give like the full thing because we don't have time for that, but where can they start?
Right. That is, that's a question that every woman who's in leadership and in business has, whether you're where you are in Australia or you're here in the United States. And the worthiness issue, again, what it comes down to is the worthiness issue, right? And where it all begins is in your identity. we're always going to go back to our identity. Who do you believe you are? Because if you really believe that you are worthy of having an opinion, if you know that what you're saying comes from a place of you mean well, you're trying to give your best, then you're not going to be so concerned about how it's being received by others. And when I'm talking about our identity is because you mentioned a few things, right? How many roles are we playing? I can look at my life and I say, okay, I'm a mom, I'm a single mom, full-time single mom. And then I'm a business owner, I'm a mentor, I'm a speaker, I'm a creative, I'm a leader. So it's like, at what time do I wear what hat? And I'm trying to please this person in this area. And then this person is going to be different in the way I need to please them. And when we're talking about people pleasing and in areas of work, you're never going to please everybody. You're not, right? But one thing that I've learned, and I feel that the value is for us, for the listeners, the value in your worthiness is going to be, remember that before you became a mother, before you became somebody's wife, before you became an employee, employer, before you served at your church, God created Rika. He just created Rika. He just created Mia. He didn't create Mia the mom, Mia the leader. He created Mia. And if God found me worthy enough of just being me, then I need to stand in that value, in that identity, and really spend my time with God and asking God, God, show me who I am in your eyes. Let me see myself through your eyes, God, because once you see yourself the way God sees you, oh, let me tell you, it's a whole different, it's like game over. It's different. Why? Because you feel it. You stand taller, your shoulders, roll back, your head is lifted higher. Why? Because God says he will lift your head higher, right? When we're not feeling worthy, what happens? Our head is hanging low, right? And I love to tell women, like, you are a queen. You are a queen. Why? Because he is the king of all kings. That means what? There's kings, there's queens here, right? This is his kingdom. So we are royalty. So, girl, act like it, walk like it, wake up and tell yourself, I am a queen. I am God's daughter, God's design. And you start speaking to yourself in that way, and you ask God, show me who you created me to be. Sorry, show me who you created me to be. Let me see myself through your eyes. You will start seeing yourself differently. You will speak differently. And then you really don't care too much about how other people see you, right? That's the problem. We're too concerned of how other people see us. Why do they matter? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. That makes complete sense. And I think the one thing that you mentioned that was so powerful to me is that Rika, the individual, was there before Rika, the mother, Rika, the business owner, Rika, the leader. And if I think back to who I was prior to anybody of like the person who I am right now, if I think back to when I was, let's say 20, I was really on fire for God. Like I was very involved in the church. I was very involved in the community with the young adults. And one thing that I noticed in comparison now to where I am now, because now it's 20 years later from where I was 20 years ago, is obviously my relationship with God is on a completely different level because it's 20 years of maturity there. But I also feel like sometimes the level of how God can use me is not the same. Why? Because I'm so distracted by the world. I'm so distracted by being a mom or being with my business or with the podcast or whatever that might look like, that I just get busy. I just get so busy that I don't get time to just listen, to just sit and listen to what God says about me and who I am. And I think in leadership, that's exactly the same thing, is we get so bogged down and so busy with who and what we are as a leader. And, something that I can testify to is when I was in my last leadership role, I felt a bit of self-importance in that role because of the role I had. This was the biggest leadership role I ever had.
And in the 5 years that I worked there, oh boy, I think I shut the doors, for God to come in and say, but hey, maybe this or maybe that. And I did listen. It's not that I wasn't a Christian, or it's not that I didn't have a relationship, but I got so busy with people pleasing and with self-gratification in that space that it ultimately burnt me out. And I've had to come back in my journey for the last 18 months of not working full time has been one of recovery from those 5 years. So yeah, I so valuable to have this conversation with you. So let's talk about burnout, because that was the one thing we talked about prior as well. That was your experience with your mental health and your burnout. So how did you come to know that you were suffering from burnout?
Well, I already, like I said, being simultaneously diagnosed clinically with complex PTSD, severe depression, anxiety due to the abuse, right? Now in survival mode, I thought that's what it is. But once I was outside of court, outside of the what had me in that state, I guess, of feeling and emotions and just such whirlwind and chaos. And once I was out of it, then I was like, wait, but I'm still feeling exhausted. I'm still like depleted. And it was in me knowing that there had to be other reasons, because I didn't want to take medication. That's one thing I never did. And I do not tell anyone to not take medication. There's people that need it. Okay. So I'm not against it. I just, because of the way things were for me in court, if I were to take medication, that would have been used against me with my daughter and say, oh, well, she has to be on meds for it. So I didn't. But once all of that was said and done, I was like, why am I still feeling this way? And here's the thing, Rika, it's happened periodically. So it's not like it happened at that point, I figured it out, and then I've been great ever since then. No, I have to constantly work on being self-care. It comes down to self-care, right? Filling my cup. And one of the things that we forget, and we hear the phrase that says you cannot pour from an empty cup, right? One of the things that I really appreciate about my church, and I hope this serves a lot of women that serve in their churches, and the fact that we can get lost in even our leadership roles at church and serving and all of that, right? Here's the thing. We forget that when God created the heaven and earth, creation, right? It was 7 days. 7 days. And it doesn't say that God created heaven and earth in 6 days. It says 7 days. But he only created it during the 6 days. But it wasn't finished until the 7th day. Why? Because he rested on the 7th day. Why did God make it a point to insert the 7th day as rest, part of creation? Because he created you to rest. God created us to rest. And one of the things, if you look up in scripture, how many times rest comes up, I hope the listeners take it as homework. Just Google it. How many times does rest come up in the Bible? That's because we're created to rest. And I mean, just think about it. Be still and know that I am God. When you talked about being burnt out, right? And you said about so many things, all the hats that you're wearing, that you didn't feel that you have time to just sit still and to connect with who you're created to be. That's why God says, be still. Be still and know that I am God. Like, you have to connect that. Why? Because if you're not still, our mind is everywhere else. It's so busy. It's in the noise, even on social media, on our phones. So I guess long answer, but yes, as far as it came to burnout, I had to figure out myself after all that was done, why am I still burnt out? And it's been a journey since then to be intentional about always making sure I fill my cup. And literally having to fight people in the religious space, family, a lot of people that saw me as, when I decided, hey, I have to put myself first, I need to. It's not selfish. It's actually well, I mean, if they think it's selfish, that's okay. But it's actually essential. I have to fill my cup first because we're not meant to pour into others unless we're in overflow. So you have to think about that. I can't be pouring into other people's cups when I'm halfway full. I will only pour for my overflow because I have to be filled first. So when we start getting that mentality of making sure self-care is a priority, we start setting schedules for ourselves and become intentional about making sure we're filled. And what are those things that fill me? You have to think about it and then start doing those things. That's when we start getting over the burnout, or at least if you haven't reached burnout, you can prevent it for sure.
Mm. Yeah, that's very profound what you mentioned, because what I did was completely the opposite of what you just suggested. For 5 years, I was just pouring from an empty cup, not doing anything to fill that cup up. And although in some sense, like I said, I got a lot of satisfaction from my work. I really, really enjoyed that, but that's not self-care, and that's not looking after myself. That's not, doing anything to pour back into myself. And it's because I'm a bit of an overachiever and a bit of a perfectionist when it comes to leadership and when it comes to work. And I really had to learn the hard way. You can't be perfect in leadership. And yeah, so after I left that work, I mentioned this to you before we recorded, I left that job feeling burnt out, not really understanding what burnout really means, because I think it's a terminology that's just been thrown around a lot. Oh, I'm so tired, but no, that must mean I've got burnout. But you can actually, my understanding is the World Health Organization has now recognized it as an official diagnosis, not in all countries. I know in Australia it's not an official diagnosis yet. But if you're feeling that you just instead of me saying how I felt, because I will share a little bit more. I think that's important for the listeners, and the listeners kind of know my story as well. But how would a person know the difference between, like, I am burnt out and I need to go and seek help, or I need to really take the time off? Because one thing that I did 2.5 years into of that 5-year leadership role was I had to take 3 weeks off, and not think about work at all. And I would have happily just taken 1 week, but my line manager was like, no, I'm going to force you to take 3 weeks, because that's what you need to recover from whatever this exhaustion is that you're feeling right now. And a lack of clarity. That was the one thing I had as well. So what would you say to the listeners who are thinking, I think I might have burnout, but I don't know what the symptoms are. I don't know what to look out for.
Yes, absolutely. One of the really big signs is brain fog. When you're just like, you talked about clarity, right? It's like you just can't get your thoughts straight. You're forgetting things. You're in brain fog. And we don't even need to be so descriptive, because if they're listening and you hear brain fog, you already know what it is, right? And there's this also just constantly being fatigued. You're just tired. You don't sleep well. You start sometimes waking up in the middle of the night and you don't even know why you're up. Your nervous system is off. And you can confuse it with depression, because it feels like depression because the joy is gone. And I remember I was driving with my daughter and she was in the car and there was times that she would get in the car from school. She was in the passenger seat and she would just look at me, and she just knew, like, on my face, right? That was one thing. But then another thing is that sometimes we would be driving and I'm not even saying anything, and she would just look at me and she'd say, "Why are you mad?" And I'd say, "What are you talking about?" She said, "No, your face. You look really mad." And honestly, I didn't even know it's just my face was showing it as I'm just driving. And you know what? I was having all these conversations in my head. My facial expression is the conversations I'm having in my head with, I think, the people that were just weighing me down with responsibilities that I wanted to tell them how I felt, but I wouldn't tell them because of my people pleasing. So you're going to be exhausted. You feel tired. Your body feels tired. You feel tired mentally, emotionally. And those are a lot of the things. And one thing I want to bring up, at least here in the United States, is because we confuse it with productivity. right? And here's the thing, productivity makes you feel good, but then there's toxic productivity, right? And here's the thing that so busyness actually becomes more and more like a brand of coping, right? And for people that use it now as a way of coping, here's an example that I found. It was just really interesting to me. And it says, okay, so productivity is a trauma response, and it becomes a very well exercised muscle because we use it so much, we depend on it, right? And it becomes both a blanket, it feels like a blanket, and a burden in your time of need. So both. It'll feel like, oh, so good because I'm finding my worthiness. I'm feeling great. It's like I'm finding confidence in it. At the same time, once your task is done and yes, you do great, guess what? You still feel down. It's like you're high and then you low, right? It's like you peak and then you go back down. And there's just so many things I don't want to bog people down with it, but busyness can become a crutch for a lot of us. So we definitely, once you start, if for anybody that's listening and you realize that you use busyness as a crutch and you resort to busyness, it can a lot of the times be a trauma response because if you put yourself in so many tasks, that means two things. One, your brain is busy and you don't have to think about certain things. And then your heart is busy and you don't have to feel certain things, right? So you're avoiding pain and you're avoiding resolving that. So it's a lot of mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual heaviness. You'll feel all of that in your burnout.
The other key term you used, which you talked about before, was survival mode, when you just feel as if you're in that survival mode. And so I was wondering, because I know for me what survival mode means, and I can share, but I was wondering if you had to define survival mode, what would you say is survival mode?
For me, survival mode was, and I think for everybody it's different, right? So it'll help when you express yours as well. But for me, during that time, my survival mode, because I was fighting for my daughter and fighting in court and fighting my abuser, I felt like I was drowning and my head was barely above water, and any wrong move was going to bring me under. And at times I felt like I could barely go and gasp for air, and then I was back underneath again because of how many things I had to juggle at that time. It's like, yes, I was busy defending myself, but I still had to be a mom. I still had to show up. I still had to provide for my daughter. I still had to be a daughter for somebody else. I had to be somebody's sister. So it's like all those roles you still have to play in other people's lives. I was barely trying to hang on for dear life for my own life, right? But then it's like, okay, I can barely do that. And now I have to still show up for you and then be this for you and help you. And then you have your problems and you want to come and tell me. Like that survival was just dreading every day to wake up. And I want to make sure that as a believer, people feel no condemnation about it, because even though our hope is in Christ, even though we know that we go to him for strength, he understands our humanity and he understands how weak we are without him. And there was many times in my life where I just felt completely even useless. As much as I did, I felt like I couldn't accomplish enough. And I felt burnt out just trying to be everything for everyone and still feeling like no matter what I did, it was not enough. And if I wrap it back around, worthiness, right? Who was I in Christ? My focus was on who am I for everybody else instead of who am I for God? So
And
yeah.
that was one word that God gave me this year to share with the listeners, was worthiness. That if God called them into those leadership positions, it's because he believes that they are worthy to be in those leadership positions. So yeah, that's really a good confirmation
that God wants us to know that we are worthy in his eyes, not worthy in the world's eyes. And so I'll share now my definition of, well, survival mode is very much similar to yours because, and my experience, because for me, it was literally being able to only focus on one thing at a time. I was unable to focus on multiple things and on multiple people and on different things that was happening in my life. And even just answering a message from my best friend who I nearly talk to every single day, it was too much for me. I put it off for days on end, and I had to she was sending SOS messages. Are you okay? What's going on? You haven't responded. And I just had to say, I'm really, really sorry. I'm just going through a tough time. She obviously then prayed for me, and she's like, why didn't you reach out sooner? I could have prayed for you days ago. But even just reaching out to her and saying I was going through a tough time, it was too much for me because I just I couldn't. Same. I felt like I couldn't get out of bed. I was just too exhausted to talk to anybody because I've got a house of 3 kids and I've got to make dinner every single day. So I've got to save my energy for my kids that actually need me, because if I'm not there for them, what's going to happen then? So thank goodness it's school term, in the last, 3 months, 8 weeks of school holidays are coming up, and I've definitely got to change some routines there to ensure that I don't, empty my cup completely just the whole time. But I knew that I needed to save my energy because these littlies, and they are still little, they need me on a daily basis, and everybody else just had to wait. So I was even just in that space where I was in survival mode, couldn't even feel like I could prioritize myself. But what I could do, what was in my power, was to cut out some things that I didn't have to deal with. That was the one suggestion when I started working with a counselor. So I decided not to go the coach route, or there's so many routes you can follow. But for me, I work with a counselor, and so in the first session that I had with him, he said to me, "What can you cut out of your life that you don't need? And you're going to cut it out. And no matter if these people are upset with you, no matter if, because obviously people pleasing, want to please these people, and I don't want to disappoint them. So don't want to disappoint them by letting it go. But I had to let things go. That was the only way. And I'm still on that journey. I'm finishing up a couple more things at the end of this year, and I'm just looking forward to catching my total breath and everything in January. Basically at, kind of like mid-December. There's a couple of things from a responsibility perspective I have to continue going, because I'm not a person I'm not a quitter, and I've got some things of value to me that I need to continue. A good example of that is I'm finishing my master's degree, and I've only got 2 weeks left of my master's degree, and then I'm done. Yay. But that was a big one. The counselor said to me, can't you drop out of your master's degree? I'm like, no, there's no way. Can you postpone it? No, there's no way. I want to finish this in the next couple of months, and then I'm done. Then I don't have to worry about that ever again. It's done. So yeah, that's kind of what survival mode looked like for me and what I did about that. I don't know if you wanted to add anything to the kind of that section where I added what to do about it.
Yes, absolutely. I am a strong believer in getting help and seeking help. I've encountered so many people that they feel their faith is alone to save them. And I'm not saying that Jesus is not enough. God is enough. Jesus is enough, right? But it's like you getting into a car accident and you're bleeding internally. And you're saying, well, I don't want to go to the emergency room, and I don't want to go to a doctor because Jesus is going to be my healer. Well, Jesus put doctors here, or God put doctors here to make sure that we can go to them for healing, right? It's the same thing for whether you choose to go to a therapist, counselor, groups. I say this because I went to one-on-one therapy, group therapy. I went to 12-step program for codependency recovery. That was amazing. I have a book that I'll refer you to that you can order on Amazon, and you can order on Amazon there. Can you?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, perfect. So, and that was pivotal in my recovery as a codependent people pleaser and all of that, which had me exhausted, burnt out. And so those are the things that I feel that we need to do, is to stop thinking that one day I'll get over it. And also thinking that just, well, I'll just pray about it and it'll be gone. Take the steps that are necessary for that and reach out to whoever. So I've done all of those. And then I went into later, I ended up hiring coaches that I paid money to take me to those next levels of mastering certain things. And for me, but it was more like when I started stepping into leadership, because I felt like I need to do more and provide more for people. So for the ones that are in that space, especially because we're women that are leaders and in business, it's essential. It's something that we need to make sure that we tend to, because at the end of the day, you're going to pay for it. And you pay for it with either your mental, emotional, physical health, and your spiritual health.
Absolutely, and I can agree on that one. I can testify. This has been such an amazing conversation. I really like this topic. I think it's so important for women and for women in leadership. That's why I decided to get you on the show, because I resonated so much with everything that's out there. I read up a little bit about you before the show, and I just was like, yep, this is going to be a good conversation. I knew that, because we're just, as women, we just want to do it all. We are superheroes. Look, we're definitely superwoman, but in that it can also be our kryptonite. We want to do all the things, and then unfortunately, because we want to do all the things and be all the things for everybody else, we give up ourselves in that process. So hopefully, I really hope for the listeners with this show and with this conversation with you, Mia, today, is that they'll go and do some self-reflection and think, okay, how can what needs to change for me? What needs to change for me? Yeah, go for it.
I would love to insert a couple of things in there.
Oh, go for it.
Leadership, that, because I know sometimes when we think of rest, sometimes it feels like, oh, then I'm going to be unproductive. And I just want to let you know that in my research, I have found rest, number one, is worship to God. Rest is worship to God. If you look up Psalms 46:10, says, be still and know that I am God. And the fourth commandment tells us to remember the Sabbath and keep it holy, right? So it's like, that's a form of worship. Rest. So rest is a form of worship. Rest is a sign of trust, because as feminine women that are relying and depending on our Creator, you can't, like, why would you think I constantly have to be working and doing for things to get done? Don't you have a God who blesses you? Don't you have a God who's working on your behalf while you rest? Don't you have a God who does things behind the scenes for you? Number three, rest. Rest is rhythmic. It's the thing of rhythm. You have to find your rhythm, and you have to see that, even secular work tells us, and remember, this is secular world, it tells us that your rest that your work without rest diminishes your returns. And that's the world telling you. Okay. Wow. Even though they tell you hustle and grind and hustle, they also tell you, well, you do too much, then you're not going to have the same returns. And if you pay attention to how God has rhythms of rest, and just look up even in creation, how he established, right? We have the sun, then we have the moon, right? Look up all of those things. And then Jesus himself rested. How many times, right? We see in the Bible that he went away even to pray. And then rest is for remembrance. So those are 4 keys I want us listeners to take away with us, that your rest is actually biblical, that God has called you to rest. Rest for remembrance. Why is that? Because in Deuteronomy 5:15, it says that he commands his people to use the Sabbath as a day to remember their former condition of slavery, right? God is a God of provision. In your rest, he will provide for you. Why? Because if you look at the children of Israel, when they were in the wilderness, God provided manna every single day. He always said, for today. You couldn't take one for the next day, except you know when? On the sixth day. He said on the sixth day, grab twice your portion, because on the seventh day, they wouldn't get any manna. You were supposed to rest. So as long as we look at rest as a form of worship to God, as a sign of trust for me that he's providing for me, as something that's a rhythmic pattern that he's already established, and as a way to remember who God is and what he's done for me, then we can slip easier into it and not feel so guilty. And then 5 quick ways. 1, unplug from your social media. Anything that's social media, the news, TV, unplug from that. 2, go for a walk and just go and enjoy God's creation. Look at the birds, look at everything and really take it in, right? Get sleep. Stop trying to stay up as late as possible. Just make sure that you get that time to rest. Spend time with God. Be intentional about setting that time just with him. And then the rest really comes in when we express, like unload everything. Unload every part of you that's weighing you down at the feet of Jesus every day. Those are the things I would say would help us to abstain from burnout, or if we're feeling burnt out, it'll definitely put us on a path of self-care and of just being in overflow.
Thank you so much. That was amazing. And I'm going to add that to the show notes as well for the listeners, because that was extremely valuable. Now, where can the listeners connect with you?
Yes, of course. So I am on Instagram, miaperez.official. And I'm working on my website right now, but they can also find me on my podcast, which is Queen Within Flow. And I finally uploaded the trailer, the first episode, and yes, so those would be the best ways to stay in touch with me. I would love any questions to just send a message, and this is what I do, empowering women and really bringing us back to the core essence of who we were created to be in the image of God.
Great. Are you at all on LinkedIn?
I'm going to be. I have LinkedIn, but I have
not set up correctly yet.
I'm going to start a new one for that. Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah, because lots of the listeners are in that corporate environment, or actually, I've got so many. That was a generalization. I've got a lot of listeners that's actually in the education space, in the health space. And sorry if I'm forgetting it. There's actually so much. I don't have that details in front of me, and I find that a lot of them connect with me on LinkedIn. So that's another good one as well. So yeah, okay. Once you're up and running, share that link with me, and I'll make sure that I include it in the show notes later on. So
absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your time today, Mia. I really, really enjoyed this conversation. Very insightful and biblical. I like the fact that it was based on biblical principles conversation with you. That was amazing.
Praise God. Thank you, Rika. I appreciate you inviting me, and I can't wait to have you on. It'll be your turn next time.
Thank you. I can't wait. Hey, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If so, would you take 30 seconds and leave me a 5-star written review on Apple Podcasts? It would mean so much to me to read your feedback. Also, it would really bless me big if you shared this episode with a fellow leader who might benefit from hearing today's message. And remember, put on the armor of God daily and walk by faith and not by sight. I'll meet you back on Monday for another episode.